It was a quiet Saturday morning in a small suburban neighborhood. The sky was clear, the air was cool, and the streets were unusually calm. Most people were still inside their homes enjoying their weekend. But for 42-year-old Daniel Harper, the morning was about to turn into something he would never forget. Daniel lived alone in a modest house at the edge of the neighborhood. His backyard wasn't very big, but he loved it. There was a small tree in the corner, a wooden fence around the property, and a patch of grass where he often relaxed after work. That morning, Daniel stepped outside with a cup of coffee in his hand. He planned to water his plants and maybe mow the lawn later. But the moment he walked onto the grass, something strange caught his eye. Near the center of the yard, the ground looked disturbed. The soil seemed freshly cracked, as if something heavy had fallen there during the night. Daniel frowned. "That's weird," he muttered to himself. He slowly walked closer. At first, he thought it might be a rock or maybe an old metal pipe that had surfaced after the recent rain. But as he approached, he realized it was something completely different. Half buried in the dirt was a long metallic object. Daniel froze. The object was cylindrical, dark gray, and covered with strange burn marks. Its surface looked scorched, almost as if it had passed through intense heat. Daniel knelt down carefully. "What the—" He brushed away some of the dirt with his hand. More of the metal surface became visible. It wasn't just metal. There were markings on it. Symbols, strange symbols that didn't look like normal letters. A sudden chill ran down Daniel's spine. The object was nearly 5 feet long and partially buried deep in the ground. The shape looked oddly familiar, but Daniel couldn't immediately place it. Then it hit him. It looked like a rocket. A small rocket. His heart started beating faster. No way, that can't be right. He stood up and looked around his yard, as if expecting someone to jump out and explain everything. But the neighborhood remained silent. Birds were chirping, leaves moved gently in the breeze. Nothing seemed unusual, except the object. Daniel crouched down again and pulled out his phone. He began taking pictures from different angles. Click, click, click. The camera flash reflected off the strange metal surface. He noticed more details now. Small bolts, panels, burned edges, and what looked like part of a serial number scratched near the bottom. Daniel's curiosity quickly turned into excitement. He opened his social media app and uploaded the photos with a simple caption. "Found this weird thing in my backyard this morning. Anyone know what it is?" At first, he thought only a few friends might see it. But within minutes, the comments started pouring in. "What is that? Looks like rocket debris. Call the police. Bro, that looks like space junk." Daniel stared at his phone as the notifications kept appearing. Dozens of people were sharing the photos. Then hundreds. Within an hour, the post had gone viral in his local community group. People began speculating wildly. Some said it was part of a satellite. Others claimed it might be military equipment. One person even joked that it could be alien technology. Daniel laughed nervously at that one. But deep down, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that this object was something important. He walked back outside and stared at it again. The metal surface looked even more mysterious in the sunlight. The burn marks were clearly visible now. Whatever it was, it had clearly fallen from somewhere. High above, Daniel suddenly wondered something. What if it fell from space? The thought made his stomach tighten. He quickly stepped back a few feet. What if it's dangerous? Radiation, chemicals, explosives. His imagination began running wild. Daniel decided not to touch it anymore. Instead, he grabbed a lawn chair and sat a few yards away, keeping his eyes fixed on the object. The hours passed slowly. More comments appeared on his post. Then something unexpected happened. A message arrived from someone claiming to be an aerospace engineer. The message read, "If that object is real, you need to report it immediately. It looks like rocket stage debris." Daniel read the message 3 times. Rocket debris. His mind raced. He suddenly remembered hearing about rockets launching satellites into orbit. Sometimes parts of those rockets fall back to Earth. But could one really land in someone's backyard? It seemed impossible. Still, the object looked real. And heavy. Very heavy. Daniel stood up and cautiously walked closer again. He leaned forward and studied the markings. There was definitely a number etched into the metal. Part of it read, R21. Below that were faded letters he couldn't fully read. His phone buzzed again. Another comment, this time from someone claiming to work at a local university. Don't move it seriously, call authorities. Daniel swallowed hard. Now he was starting to feel uneasy. What if this wasn't just a random piece of junk? What if it belonged to the government? Or the military? Suddenly, the situation didn't feel exciting anymore. It felt serious. Daniel stepped back again and returned inside his house. He paced across the living room while staring at the photos on his phone. His heart was still racing. Finally, he decided to call the local non-emergency police number. The operator listened carefully as he explained the situation. At first, she sounded skeptical. But when Daniel mentioned the size and burn marks, her tone changed. Sir, she said, please stay away from the object. We'll notify the appropriate authorities. Daniel nodded even though she couldn't see him. Okay, yeah, I'll stay inside. He hung up. The house suddenly felt very quiet. Outside the window, the mysterious metal object sat silently in the yard. Waiting. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the next morning was going to bring something far more shocking than he could ever imagine. Because by sunrise, the military would arrive, and when they saw what was buried in his backyard, everything would change. Daniel barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined the strange metal object sitting silently in his backyard. Questions kept running through his mind. Where had it come from? Was it really part of a rocket? And if it was, why had it landed in his yard? Around midnight, he walked to the window and looked outside again. The backyard was dark and quiet. Under the faint glow of the porch light, the object looked even more mysterious than before. Its burned surface reflected a dull shine, almost like it had traveled through fire. Daniel shivered. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself, someone will explain this tomorrow. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him into a light sleep. But early the next morning, something woke him up. A distant rumbling sound. At first, he thought it was thunder. Then he heard it again. Engines. Daniel sat up in bed. The sound was getting louder. He rushed to the window and pulled the curtain aside. His heart nearly stopped. Outside his house, 3 large black vehicles were slowly pulling up along the street. They didn't look like normal trucks. They were military vehicles. Daniel blinked in disbelief. Wait, what? The vehicles stopped right in front of his house. Doors opened. Several men stepped out. They were wearing dark uniforms. 2 of them carried metal cases. Another one spoke into a radio. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. This can't be happening. Within seconds, one of the men knocked firmly on his front door. Daniel walked down the hallway slowly, his heart pounding. When he opened the door, a tall man in a military uniform stood there. Are you Daniel Harper? The officer asked calmly. Daniel nodded nervously. Yes, that's me. The officer glanced behind him toward the backyard. We received a report about an unidentified object found on your property. Daniel swallowed. Yeah, it's back there. The officer gave a short nod. May we take a look? Daniel stepped aside. Of course. Within moments, the group of experts walked through the house and into the backyard. The moment they saw the object, their expressions changed. One of the men immediately stopped walking. Another leaned forward slightly, staring at it. Is that? One of them murmured. The officer turned to the others. Careful, no one touches it yet. Daniel stood a few steps away, watching their reactions. They looked serious. Very serious. One of the experts slowly approached the metal object and crouched beside it. He brushed away some of the remaining dirt. Then he saw the markings. Suddenly his eyes widened. "Oh my God!" The man quickly stood up and turned to the officer. "Sir, you need to see this." The officer stepped closer. "What is it?" The expert pointed at the serial markings on the metal surface. "This isn't just random debris." The officer leaned down and examined the numbers. Then his face turned pale. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked nervously. For a moment, no one answered him. Finally, the expert stood up and looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Harper, do you know what this is?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I was hoping you could tell me." The expert took a deep breath. "This appears to be a section of a rocket booster." Daniel blinked. "A rocket booster?" The officer nodded slowly. "Yes, part of a launch vehicle." Daniel stared at the object again. "So it fell from space?" "Most likely," the expert replied. He ran a small scanner over the surface. The device beeped softly. Then the expert's expression suddenly changed. He stared at the scanner screen, then back at the object, then back at the screen again. "What is it?" the officer asked. The expert looked shocked. "This piece shouldn't be here." "What do you mean?" "It belongs to a classified launch mission." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Classified?" The officer's voice became serious. "Explain." The expert swallowed. "This serial number matches a rocket that was launched 3 weeks ago." "And?" The expert hesitated. "That rocket was supposed to burn up completely in the atmosphere." The backyard suddenly felt very quiet. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. "So it wasn't supposed to land anywhere?" he asked. "No," the expert said slowly. "It was." The officer looked around the yard. "Is this the only piece?" Daniel nodded quickly. "Yes, that's all I saw." The officer spoke into his radio. "We need a recovery team immediately." Within an hour, more vehicles arrived. Technicians carefully placed protective barriers around the object. A small crane was brought in. Daniel stood near the fence, watching everything unfold. He felt like he was inside a movie. Neighbors had begun gathering outside their homes, whispering and pointing. No one could believe what was happening. Finally, the recovery team carefully lifted the rocket debris from the ground. The metal object rose slowly into the air. As the dirt fell away from it, more of the burned surface became visible. The expert examined it one last time. Then he turned to Daniel. "You're extremely lucky." Daniel frowned. "Lucky?" The expert nodded. "If this piece had landed just a few feet closer to your house." He paused. "It could have gone straight through the roof." Daniel looked back at his house. A chill ran through his body. For the first time, he realized how dangerous the situation could have been. The officer stepped closer. "Mr. Harper, thank you for reporting this immediately." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm just glad no one got hurt." The officer gave a small smile. "You handled the situation very responsibly." Soon, the rocket debris was loaded onto a truck. The military vehicles prepared to leave. Before stepping into his vehicle, the officer turned back toward Daniel. "One more thing," he said. Daniel looked at him. "Yes." The officer gestured toward the empty hole in the ground. Not many people can say that a piece of a rocket landed in their backyard. Daniel laughed softly. "I guess that's true." The officer nodded. "Just another reminder." "Of what?" "That sometimes the most extraordinary things fall right into ordinary places." With that, the vehicles drove away. The street slowly returned to normal. Daniel stood alone in his backyard. The grass was still disturbed where the object had landed. He looked up at the sky. Somewhere far above, rockets were still launching into space. And for one brief moment, A piece of that vast universe had landed right outside his door. It had been terrifying, confusing, unbelievable, but it was also something Daniel would never forget. Because sometimes, the greatest mysteries don't happen in space. Sometimes, they fall right into your backyard. And that's the unbelievable story of the man who thought he found a rocket in his backyard. What started as a normal morning quickly turned into a discovery that shocked everyone. If you enjoyed this mysterious story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible and shocking stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.